Devdutt Patnaik is a renowned author and historian who speaks about Indian culture in detail. Especially if you don't know much about Indian culture, I feel like this conversation is a great inlet into the world of Hinduism, into Hindu philosophy, into the philosophies of yoga. The specialty of this man is that he connects ancient wisdom to modern day outlooks, to modern day problem solving abilities, to modern day mindsets. And I hope that that's what you gain from this special episode of The Ranveer Show. Remember to follow TRS on Spotify. We're a Spotify exclusive now, which means that every episode is available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. This is Devdutt Patnaik on The Ranveer Show. Mr. Devdutt Patnaik, sir. This is Dr. Devdutt Patnaik, sir, actually. This is such a dream podcast for me. We just finished a Hindi episode, which was fantastic.
Thank you. Thank
You
so
were
much.
on my original list when I conceived this podcast, like when I thought of it for the English podcast, actually.
Okay.
I'm glad we did Hindi, and the listeners should check out the Hindi episode. I'll let you explain why people should check out the Hindi episode first.
I think there are many things in Indian mythology which, when you speak in Hindi, has a magic which you don't get it in English. In English, there's another kind of magic. I think every language brings its own magic onto the table. And I wish I spoke more languages. I speak only these two mainly. I speak other languages, but I'm easy with these two languages. So I think when I speak Hindi, I go in a very different trip. And my English trips are very different. Both have their values, but they're not the same. They're very different.
100%. I know what you mean. And I mean, you know what a casual flex is? A casual flex in Gen Z terms is when you show off a little bit, but very, in a cool way. So I'm going to casual flex here and say that you don't meet too many content creators who speak both the languages. And they kind of feed off each other. So I'm deeply grateful that you're doing the English episode. The Hindi episode's theme was much more related to, mental health and everyday problems. On the English episode, I want to talk about the dark side of mythology, of, say, Indian epics, of just what India has to offer to the world. India's got a lot of bright spots, lots of positivity, lots of spiritualism, but there's a lot of dark stuff in the stuff we read, the stuff we learn, that the world probably doesn't know about. So I'd actually let you take it up from here, sir.
See, in India, the dark side revolves around basically, imagine the very basic human of you're hungry and your hunger is not satisfied at all. Right? It's not satisfied at all. So, for example, in Greek mythology, there is a character called Tantalus. And Tantalus is thrown in jail by the Greek, not in jail, but in hell by the Greek gods in Tartarus. And he is always thirsty and hungry. But he stands on a pool of water and it's sweet smelling water. But whenever he tries to go down and drink the water withdraws from him. And above him, there is a tree which is full of fruits, rich fruits, succulent fruits. But if he tries to reach out to eat a fruit, the fruit moves away. So he's always hungry and thirsty. This idea in Hindu mythology is caught by this concept called Pret. Bhoot, Pret. So Pretas, even in Buddhist traditions in Japan and China, they use the word Pret. It's called hungry ghost. These are ghosts who are so hungry but they don't have a body. And because they don't have a body, they don't have a mouth, they don't have a stomach. So anything they eat just slips out of them. So they're always hungry and they're haunting and they're suffering. The whole world is supposed to be, we're surrounded by pretas around us. And they are the ones who sort of create all the problems for us because they're hungry and they want food and nobody's giving them food. And even if you give them food, they're not eating. They can't eat. And that suffering is the greatest, from their darkness emerges. So Preta it is called. The Preta is all about darkness.
So I have a couple of questions here. One, I'm guessing you mean this symbolically in many ways, like that all the evil in the world boils down to suffering. Like your own suffering will create evil that you'll give out to the world.
Yeah. So it is symbolic. Or mythology is symbolic. Mythology is all about symbols. But you just triggered me with a word called evil. The word evil cannot be translated in any Indian language. It is a completely Judeo-Christian concept. It's not found in Chinese. China, there's dark forces, but evil as a word, which is Satan, Shaitan, devil, these are ideas which come to us from Jewish, not even Jewish, Christian and Islamic mythologies. So the idea of Shaitan, the idea of devil comes to us from these mythologies, and now we consider them universal. So evil, with diabolos, is not an idea in Hindu mythology. It's not there. We don't, that word doesn't exist.
Why do you think so?
Because the Western world is based on monotheism, one God, and all good things are supposed to come from that one source. So then when bad things happen, you need an explanation. Where does this bad thing come from? Right? And the West believes you live only one life. So in your one life, if negative things happen to you, then somebody else is doing it. And therefore they've constructed this idea called evil. Right? So all good, therefore there's an opposite called all bad. Hindu mythology is based on rebirth. Action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction. So everything negative that happens to you is what you have done in your past life. So there is no external force that is causing negativity in your life. It is you who have created a baggage of karma, which is creating the good and bad in your life. So evil as an idea is not found in rebirth cultures. So Jainism, Buddhism, Hinduism, which is based on rebirth, does not have evil at all. There is no evil concept.
It just has action and reaction.
It's just action and reaction. So everything is action reaction. The gods are not. So you don't have this idea of gods and angels and angels and demons fighting each other. And that's really a Christian concept, and at best an Islamic concept. And because Christianity and Islam control most of the world, 80% of the world is shaped by Christian ideas and Islamic ideas. We don't realize that before Christianity, nobody had the concept of evil. There was no evil in the pagan traditions. In the Greek mythology does not have evil. Sumerian mythology doesn't have it. Mesopotamian doesn't have it. Chinese doesn't have it. Japanese don't have it. They have ghosts and goblins and all kinds of dark creatures, but it's not evil.
Speaking of dark creatures, I got to highlight Rakshasas, Asuras, demons. Like when you read about Indian epics, Indian stories, there's always mentions of these demons, Asuras.
Yes.
So for people who aren't very familiar with the epics, and Asuras basically, especially, when television shows us these epics, they paint Asuras as villains, as like these guys who have magical powers.
Yes.
Basically demons. They can bring their magic to warfare, things like that. Do you think creatures like this existed and don't exist anymore? Do you think that are these also symbolic? What is the truth about Asurs?
So mythology is basically stories through which they're telling you about day-to-day life. That's all. Mythology is just, it's a story, poetic way, an impressionist and romantic way of explaining things that you experience in life. They're not talking about objective reality. They're talking about subjective reality. So it's not historical. It is not outside you. It's all inside you. It's all in your mind. It all comes from your mind. So when they show monsters, they're all inside your mind. So these stories, for example, the Rakshasas live in the forest. And the word Rakshasa comes from the word Rakshak, secure, the ones who protect. So they are forest creatures. Now, when you go to the forest and you want to take something from the forest creatures will attack you. So the old days, they would call the Rakshas. So you're traveling through the forest and suddenly a wolf comes and attacks you, a tiger comes and attacks you, a snake attacks you, scorpions attack you, a bat attacks you, you fall into a pit of thorns and snakes eat you. So you'll say Rakshasa because you're an enemy. Asuras are supposed to live under the earth. So Rakshasas live above the earth in the forest. Asuras live under the earth and they're fighting the Devas who live in the sky. So it's a tension between Devas who have everything. So all the wealth in the world comes from under the earth, right? Water comes from minerals. The crops come from under the earth. And all this wealth is taken by the Devas in the heavens. So Devas have taken everything that belongs to Asuras. So Asuras want it back. So they continuously don't let Devas live in peace, saying that give us back, give it back, give it back. So in a way, you see this: the villains are someone who are fighting to take what they believe belongs to them. So Rakshasas are people who take things from you, and Asuras are those beings who believe you have taken their wealth, and so they're taking it back from you again. Right? So we don't like people who take things from us. We don't like thieves who take things from us. We don't like people who take away our positive energy. We meet people who take away our good mood. We don't like them. We don't like people who take things from us. We don't like people who violate us without our permission, without our consent. So we don't like people who touch us, take our property, take our mental well-being. So these are the Rakshasas, these are the Asuras who don't bring joy to your life, who fill your life with just suffering because they take things away from you.
So it's a metaphor for bad people.
It is a metaphor for people you think are bad. Let me clarify that. There are no bad people in the world. There are people who are hungry.
Yeah.
And you are their food. So they're going to consume you. The way a plant consumes sunlight and water and animals consume plants, there are people who consume people. They feed off each other's. They feed off you. They feed off your misery. They feed off your suffering. So they are, and the such people surround you, then they are the ghosts. They are the pisachas. The pisacha, preta, bhuta, asura, rakshasa. So there are beings in the world which are hungry. They're basically, hunger is the big metaphor through which you understand all this.
I've got to ask you an extremely wide question. So even if your answer goes on for half an hour, so be it. I know you're a man of science. You've studied medicine. You've told me that how, that gave you structural thought in your head. We read your books. We know the kind of stuff you speak about. You always talk about mythology from a very everyday perspective. In the Hindi podcast, you mentioned a beautiful concept. You said that people actually in India, a lot of people get offended when you use the word mythology and they want to say that, yo, this is our history. It's not mythology. How dare you call it mythology? A part of me, and this is maybe the child in me speaking, I do believe that maybe 10,000, 20,000 years back, there was a war that took place, which is probably what people refer to as the Mahabharata. So I actually feel like there must have been a bunch of kings. There must have been a war. I don't know how concepts like Rakshasas, concepts like all these magical weapons, atom bombs, like we talk about Brahmastra, one of the most powerful weapons ever used in history. Maybe there was a concept of atom bombs. Maybe science was advanced in that phase. The first wide part of the wide question is, sir, do you feel it happened? The second part of the wide question is something I got to thank the History Channel for, which is that was there a role of aliens in this whole situation? Because the West looks at a lot of Indian epics in that light. Yeah. That, okay, there were aliens, there were scientific advancements. We hear about flying machines. So did it happen? And what's the magic in it?
The short answer is no.
Okay.
No aliens, no ancient civilizations. The thing is, the human imagination is fabulous. If I see a man, that is what makes us special. We can imagine, right? If I can imagine flying, I can imagine going underwater. I can imagine a weapon that can go forwards and backwards, left and right. Humans have created technology because we could imagine. First you imagine a technology, then you build it. You imagine, and we underestimate the power of imagination. And our imagination is always going to be greater than our reality. So it is not that there is a Brahmastra which exists. It exists in our imagination. We underestimate that. Now about did it exist in the ancient past? If you value science, you will value evidence, measurement. So you start going into the past, and you know that Indian civilization, the Harappa is 4,500 years old, not 10,000 years old. 10,000 years ago, there was nothing in India. There were tribes who were wandering around and nothing else. So you have prehistoric stones and megalithic cultures and dolmens and all that. And they would tell each other stories, right? And all kinds of stories they would have told. So that's all that is there. And we just try to, we want to believe that it exists. It's like saying, does love exist? Does justice exist? Justice doesn't exist. It's an imagination. Equality, imagination. So these ideas, when you see these science fiction movies, science fictions are, you're creating stories of imagination, other planets. And that is motivating someone to travel to another planet. That's what poetry does. That's what we imagined, that we can fly, and then somebody invented a plane. We could imagine traveling across the world. Like every day you eat food and you're cooking every day, and you're eating food, and every day you're cooking, every day eating. And then you imagine, one day there will be a vessel that will produce food without meat cooking. And that is how the idea of cornucopia comes in Greek mythology. In Indian mythology, it's called Akshay Patra. Akshay Patra is something which is overflowing with food and grain. Now, so these are ideas which come from basic human needs. Like you are like every day saying that, I wish if I just imagine it will manifest itself. and somebody came up with an idea called Chintamani, or a wish fulfilling gem. Hold it in your hand, whatever you want, you'll get. So we create these imaginations. That's all it is. Aliens is something which is very popular in America. It became very popular as we discovered the moon and all that. So in the last 100 years, you won't find these ideas before 100 years. So this whole idea of the other people from other planets are coming to India. The world, you see, alien stories are not very popular in India. Bollywood does not produce alien stories. Hollywood does. You have to ask yourself, why does Bollywood not produce so many aliens? We have to think one Krish or something like that. And people, in the end, it became Krishna. Ghoom fir ke, it became God of Hinduism. Because we can't handle these alien ideas. Like E.T. was such a big film in Hollywood. We couldn't replicate it in India because you have superhero movies in Hollywood. You try to create a superhero in Hindi, it will be a super flop. It doesn't work because Rajinikanth doesn't have to wear costumes to be a Superman. He can throw cigarettes and fly in the air and do all sorts of crazy things without wearing a suit. So these idea of aliens is very American, European ideas. And the problem with white people is, unfortunately, they think whatever they experience is universal. So they don't realize the world doesn't think like them. The world doesn't have the same ideas. This is one thing that the West cannot handle is that they are not the world. They are the West. They are not the East. They are not the North. They are not the South. They are not the center. It is very difficult to white people and the Western civilization to realize. So they are always thinking there is someone coming from outside. No, they're coming from around you. It's aliens. So when you talk about zombies, you're really talking about your fear of immigration. You fear immigrants and you call them zombies. They're coming continuously to eat you, to take away everything that is yours. And your fear is projected in the idea called zombies. But zombies, when did zombie movies start? They started when immigration became an issue. And they always cross the walls. I don't know if you see the World War Z movie where they keep crossing the wall. So however big a wall you'll build, we will cross and come and eat you. It's your fear which you have transformed into zombie. What is superhero movies? Let's look at superhero movies. Superhero movies, why does the hero have to hide the superpowers? It comes in oldest superhero kind of character is Scarlet Pimpernel. Scarlet Pimpernel is a very famous English story of this French man who would pretend to be very ordinary, but secretly he would be a great swordsman. So Scarlet Pimpernel, Zorro had masks. So you want to hide your talent. You don't want to tell the world how talented you are. You want to. So you always. Why do you have Peter Parker not telling the world I'm Spider-Man? Why does he have to wear a mask? Why does he have to hide his? Why does he want to be ordinary in public and then extraordinary, and he doesn't want to share his extraordinariness? Now, that is an issue in the West. Because how do you deal with being talented? When you're in a mediocre world, when you're super talented, you lose your friends because I get isolated. Your friends don't be friends with you. This idea, this horror of life that when my talents alienate me from my friends manifests in a superhero movie. That issue is not there in India. And therefore, Indians don't create superhero movies. It doesn't connect with us. We try. I know every Bollywood writer who has tried to approach me wants to do superhero movies. And I'm like, India mein nahi chalega, Bhojpur mein nahi chalega, Jaipur, it will not work in India. And they keep saying, why won't it work? I said, every culture has its own storytelling techniques. Anime movies is Japanese. You can't create anime in India because anime satisfies a very particular interest in Japan, which is, so when you go to Japan, they have got these huge libraries with anime. Even the Americans, although now every young person is consuming them, it's a very small proportion of the world. It is not culturally connecting with the rest of the world. That kind of comic culture. That when you see some of the anime, they're like sophisticated. But the way the animes are written in Japan are very different from the way superhero comics, DC, Marvel appears, or Thanatos. And look at all the American obsession with wanting to save the world. So Batman saves the world, Superman saves the world, Spider-Man saves the world. Everybody's saving the world. Why do you want to save the world? It is coming from Jesus complex. Like Jesus will save the world. Instead of Jesus, you have Superman. Instead of that, you have Batman. Because the need to save is a very big American idea. Evangelism. It's not there in India. Indians don't have the concept of savior.
Indians have cooler concepts like Aghoris and Kala Jadoo.
Yeah, so we have got different ways of looking at the world. So the Aghoris and the Kala Jadus are, ask yourself, why do you want Kala Jadoo? Because you want to be powerful.
Okay, what is Kala Jadoo for people who've never heard the term?
So it's black magic, basically. Kala, black, Jadoo, magic.
But what is it?
See, any supernatural activity that hurts you is black magic. It's as simple as that. So they'll say the magic can be used for good and bad. So when you have science, for example, science can be used to save the planet and can be used to make a few people rich at the cost of others. So technology which makes so nowadays we have 1% of the world controlling 90%. That's Kala Jadoo. It's black science. Science that helps only a few people become super rich. And that's black science. So black magic, black science. I'm giving you an analogy of that.
Yeah.
So magic is just science imagined.
But what's the logic of, like, when we talk about Aghoris or Naga Babas and the practices of eating flesh? Where does all this originate from?
So these are people who didn't want to be part of society. So India has a very vast tradition of people who don't fit into society. They don't want to marry and produce children and live this ordinary life. They want to be different. Now in America, in the Western country, you have the punks and you have got a different. I don't want to be part of society. I have my satanic churches and all that cool, dark. And human civilization is always filled with people who don't want to be part of the mainstream. And society doesn't allow you to be part of the mainstream. Everybody says, no, you have to be part of the mainstream. You want to be part of the mainstreams. And there is a bunch of people who say, nahi, mere ko nahi banne ka hai. I don't want to marry. I don't want to produce children. I don't want to live the life you are leading. I want to be different. I want to explore something different. And the akhadas offer you that opportunity. They offer you the opportunity. And the thing is, the fact is, men get more opportunity than women. Because so you have naked men, all these Aghoris are naked men wandering. If a woman wandered like that, she would be raped and killed. So she can't do that. But in the male patriarchal society, men can just wander around. And they wander around, they live their own life by their own rules, they meet other people like them. So it's a club.
But is there any spiritual significance related to it? Like the way we have...
See, they are free. So they have found their spiritual answers. They find their answers. For them, it's Shiva. They want to be free of all bonds and they live life on their own terms. They have rules within the organization because that gives them a support structure. Yeah. But effectively, everybody's left alone. You do your own thing. And you sort of have some kind of support structure because you need you're traveling around and you know where to go. Ye akhada se wo akhada jao. But it's basically freedom. The best thing in the world is freedom.
Yeah. So, when we use the term Hinduism, people say that there's no such concept called Hinduism. And the word Hindu was a word that probably the West and Persia gave to the people who lived on the other side of the Indus River, which was called Hindu.
Yes.
And then over time, that word became Hindu.
Yes.
But when we talk about Hinduism, what is it actually? And I'd love to know this from you because you're someone who reads a lot of...
Yeah, so it's very simple. It is an ideas which emerged in South Asia.
Okay.
Simple. There are a whole bunch of ideas that emerged. What is unique? Animals don't produce ideas. Humans do. And every tribe produces its own idea. And these ideas manifest in the clothes you wear, the food you eat, the technology you create, the rituals that you follow. So everybody is different. Right? Maasai tribes are different. Bhil tribes are different. Native Americans are different. Indigenous people are different. So there are different kinds of ideas. But the Indian subcontinent, which is now called South Asia, has a very unique idea, which is not found anywhere else in the world. And that is the Hindu, you want to call it Hinduism, you want to call it Hindu Dharma, you want to call it culture. These are words. Words don't matter. But they're explaining ideas which are unique to India. I always give the example of food. When I go to the West, I'm served food with cutlery. And if I go to a very great restaurant, they'll say soup, then they'll give you salads, then they'll give you main course, then they'll give you dessert. Food comes in sequence. You have Master Chef program where there's something called plating and you eat what the chef has provided to you. You don't change the food. So he gives you soup, you eat the soup. Maybe you put a little salad, a butter, a little bit. But that's it. That's all you're going to have. Soup. Only when you finish the soup, they'll give you the main course. Only when you finish the main course, they'll give you the dessert. You can't say, no, I want to begin with the dessert. So see that's pattern. You go to China, it's a bowl with hot water, whether it's a Vietnamese pho or something pho, or you have a Japanese bowl. You have these bowls from where, and chopsticks are used. They will not allow knife on the table. It's considered bad manners in China and Japan that the host has not cut things to the size that you can eat. It's considered bad manners to have a knife on the table. Completely different way of thinking. So how do I know that this is the West? I see the cutlery. How do I know it's the East? I know it is chopsticks and hot water and picking up from the chopsticks defines for me the Eastern way of thinking. Broadly, it's not exact. What defines India? The thali. You have a large plate where there are lots of foods and vegetables kept, and bread and rice is provided to you. You decide what you want to eat. So if it's in a cup, you'll say, I don't want to eat this, you can just throw it out. And then you mix. We'll take rice and we'll take lentils and vegetables and pickles. We mix and we prepare our own dish and we put it in our mouth. It's customized. So the cook doesn't know what you're eating. Now, this is uniquely Indian. This, for me, comes from an Indian culture. So the Persians would say the people of Ind, the ones who eat in thali, it's a function. Now, why did we create the thali? Why did this idea become popular? This is what defines the Indian way of thinking. Not all Indians, but definitely the elite in India. The elite in India live this life. They have a plate. Elite, the word elite means those who have resources. So that's what it is. So for me, when you say Hinduism, I'll say, okay, who eats on a thali? Now let's look at Pakistan. Pakistan, do they eat in thali? They do. But they have chosen to follow a thinking pattern which has come from the Middle East. And so they're torn between being the eastern edge of the Middle East and the western edge of India. They're torn between that. But India doesn't have that burden. We don't carry that burden. So that's why the Hinduism is this idea, the broad idea. It's a cultural idea. Remember the word religion, the British created it for the world. Europeans created the word religion. The word religion didn't exist anywhere in the world before the 19th century. At all. It didn't exist. Either you belong to a faith or you were a heretic. Right? So the idea of religion also is a 100-year-old idea. I call it ideas. Let's look at culture. So Indian culture is very different. And the simplest example is eating by hand on a thali. And that is what makes India special. You eat by hand on a thali. And there's a particular way you eat. With the right hand, how you tear the roti, how you dip the roti. Now this only Indians do. And that makes us a tribe. That's Hindu.
So, but like these ideas of monotheism versus what we follow. Where there is Shiv Bhagwan, there is Vishnu, there is Brahm, then there are these Matas. Where did all that originate? And I also believe in whatever we follow, I don't know if we can call it Hinduism, there is also a concept of Parabrahm, which is again a monotheism concept, which is one God. So for someone who's just listening into all this and has no idea what I'm talking about, could you break that down?
So monotheism becomes popular around the world only 1700 years ago in Roman Empire. So let's go back in history. The Greeks had many gods. The Romans had many gods. They didn't care. When they would conquer other people, they would have people have gods. They didn't care. They said, so long as you pay our taxes and you say the emperor is also God, we are fine. One day, because of whatever reasons, the Roman emperor realizes that I cannot control this empire. So he changes he's into Christianity. He becomes a Christian. Emperor Constantine becomes Christian. And he says, everybody now in the religion should only follow my religion, nobody else's religion. It's the first time in human history somebody did this. It was never there before. Previously, everybody followed different religions, whatever gods you want, whatever you want, you believe in. This idea of monotheism, there's one God and nobody else shall worship anybody but my God, emerges as a political idea only in the 3rd century AD. And then suddenly the Roman Empire is completely Christian. Just when the Roman Empire was getting completely Christian, a new idea emerges in the Middle East called Islam. And Islam says that, there's only one God, that's Allah. And that idea spreads rapidly around the Middle East. Zoroastrianism also believed in one God, but they said that we worship one God like the Jews. Jews had one God, but they didn't impose it on others. The Zoroastrians also did not impose it on others. They said, we have one God, that's our faith, but other people have other faiths. So the Jews didn't push the idea, the Zoroastrians didn't push the idea. But in Islam, it became a big thing. The Muslim community emerges at that time, 7th century, 8th century, 9th century. They become very powerful in the Middle East. They spread rapidly. And now the Christians and the Muslims start fighting. The Crusades happen in the 10th century. The big war happens. And then, of course, the Muslim world becomes very powerful. Very, very powerful. The Ottomans rule Turkey. Then the Safavids in Iran. Mughals in India. Very rich. The Persian culture. Then the Europeans come up with the scientific discoveries, which make them very powerful. So they were Christians, they had been defeated, they have been defeated in the Crusades completely. They became powerful with the special technology. They had technology, they had science, and that transformed the world. They became colonizers, they became the colonizers of the world. Only now we are living in a post-colonial era. When they came to the world, they said that, we come with one idea, there should be only one God, one truth. This idea is now everybody thinks that is religion. You have to have one God, one truth. But before 3rd century AD, nowhere in the world this idea existed. It's a 1700-year-old idea. Let's be realistic. Now come to India. In India, we've always had many gods. The gods that, there was the Harappa civilization, which was a civilization without temples, without kings. Entire civilization, like Egypt, when you go to Egypt, when you go to Mesopotamia, you have temples, you have kings, you have burials. But Harappa civilization, which has 1 million square kilometers, which is Indus River, so it's part of it is in Pakistan, part of it is in India. This is Indus civilization, which was 4,500 years ago, which traded with Sumeria and all that, had no temples, had no king palaces. They have no great burials. They didn't care. So clearly there's a different way of thinking. This ends, and then you have the Vedic civilization emerging, and they are talking about many gods, Indra, Agni, Soma, and they're worshipping through fire. They're talking to the gods. They are a small group of people, but there are other people who worship rocks, they worship rivers, they worship mountains, they worship plants, animals. And in India, these ideas still exist. We follow all those practices. Even today, new ideas emerged. Buddhism came, Jainism emerged. This idea of what you said, Parabrahma, is Upanishadic ideas which emerged, which is somebody said one God, somebody said two gods, somebody said 5 gods. We said, you know what? We don't have to replace an idea. We can keep adding to it. So if the West, what has happened in the West is they feel there should only be one idea. And when a new idea comes, reject the old idea. So when they had polytheism, then they became monotheistic, then they became atheistic. God doesn't exist. And they keep fighting. That Richard Dawkins keeps screaming and I'm like, what is your problem if other people believe in God? So they've become intolerant. As a society, the West only allows one idea at a time. India has always said that multiple ideas can exist. We don't need to replace the book. We'll build a bookshelf. All books, bring it in. And every book, some are up, you will classify books differently. I will classify differently. You will classify differently. Depending on your needs, you will classify books differently and you choose books differently. That's the Indian way. That is pluralism. So we have monotheism? Yes. You have polytheism? Yes. You have atheism? Yes. You have agnosticism? That is also there in India. So what is Hinduism? All of the above. And you're like, no. That is too confusing. Tell us one. And the West doesn't realize that's your problem, not mine. Because you don't have a cupboard to occupy many books. I do. You want only one book at a time. That's your problem, not my problem. That's your problem. And this is what people don't get about. So Indian philosophy is layers of ideas. There is the Harappan, there is the Vedic, then there's the Puranic, there is Buddhist, there's Jain, there are modern ideas. Christianity comes to India, Islam comes to India. Indian Islam is very different from Islam in Middle East. We have dargahs, which will be considered shirk or completely wrong things. If you go to Middle East, Saudi Arabia, they will consider it idolatry. We have Sufi saints, we have dargahs, we have got qawwalis. These ideas are very Indian. It is not found anywhere else in the world. People don't realize that they're Indo-Islamic culture, it's called, which we are unfortunately losing right now. But the idea of dargahs is a very unique Indian idea. The idea of Sufi saints, the idea of Ghazis and all which are there is a very unique idea. It is not there in Middle East. So India has so many ideas that people don't even realize. You take flowers to the dargah and Imam Badas and all that. If you see some of the practices and the rituals, uniquely developed in India. And we have allowed it. Even Jesus is worshipped in India with flowers. You will not see this in Rome. We'll put garlands around Shiva. Or you have Mother Mary's around Jesus. Mother Mary's images are taken in fields and as part of fertility festivals in Goa, in Kerala, in Mangalore. So these are very Indian versions of Christianity, Indian versions of Islam. So India never rejects an idea. It always says, this is also fine. Like a thali, we have all kinds of foods on our tables. We don't have sequence. It's simultaneous.
So because you're someone who kind of ties all this storytelling into modern day relevant metaphors, I have to bring you back to, this core concept of Hinduism. There's something called the Vishnu Puran in Hinduism.
Yes.
And I know this because there was a show called Vishnu Puran, which I saw when I was a kid. It was made by the same people who made the famous B.R. Chopra
Yeah,
Mahabharata,
I know.
which is a great show. And that's something I recommend that everyone watch to get some perspective,
perspective,
on the Mahabharata. But specifically the Vishnu Puran, the first episode begins with the creation of Vishnu Bhagwan.
Yeah.
And then Vishnu Bhagwan leads to the creation of Brahma, Shiva. And then the three of them eventually lead to the creation of their so-called wives, which is divine feminine energy.
Yes.
I'd love to understand this because this is something I've never understood. I've understood it from the Western concept of there's one God which is divided into divine masculine, divine feminine. And then they say that gets divided into different energies, like your star signs. They bring in star signs into that. Never understood the Indian Hindu concept, even though I've grown up in this country.
So there is no one idea. Please remember, Vishnu Puran was written in the 5th century AD. That is only 1500 years old. It's not older than that. So the Vedic period, there was no Vishnu Puran. Okay. So these are new ideas. So broadly, Indian
And
ideas.
it's basically to convey
Ideas.
teachings. And
In the larger, the simple word to use is ideas.
Okay.
I use the word myth, which is very specific meaning. But to simplify it further, I will use the word ideas. And everybody, because ideas are of different types. One type of idea is called myth, which is how you imagine the world. So mythology, I write mythology. How do different people imagine the world? So how do Christians imagine the world? How do Muslims imagine the world? How do tribal people imagine the world? How do Maasai tribes imagine the world? How do Zulu tribes imagine the world? Everybody has a different imagination of the world. How does the world begin? How does the world come to an end? What happens when you die? Everybody has different stories. So mythologies are different. So Indian stories is that the world is full of many truths. Just keep aggregating them. Now the oldest idea which came in India was which we have today, the Vedic ideas, which said, you give God something and the gods give you back something else. And there's a cyclical relationship. Then Buddha came and said, you know what? The purpose of life is sorrow. And the more you desire things, the more you want things, the more you accumulate things, the more unhappiness will come. So he popularized monasticism, hermit behavior. So in India, two ideas emerged which were always in conflict with each other. One idea said, the purpose of life is to enjoy life, to remove insecurities, to satisfy hungers and do what you want. So if you can take away your hunger and you can take away your insecurities, life is great. Material. The whole new idea emerges saying, no, the purpose of life is not to get food and not to get power, but really to outgrow your hunger and outgrow your insecurities. So it's a private journey. So it became what we call the spiritual journey. So on one side there is a spiritual journey, the other side there is a material journey. The material is called the household, and the spiritual journey is called the hermit's journey. So this is the two big ideas in India. One group says withdraw from the world, one says engage with the world. So Buddhism, Jainism, Shiva, all come in this world where they say they don't want to be part of this world. Withdraw, reduce your wants. The other says enjoy. These two ideas are having a conflict. Around 2000 years ago, people started writing the Puran saying, how do we reconcile these two ideas? On one side is the Vedic idea of material enjoyment, Indra, Agni, win a war, make money, enjoy your life. And then there's the Buddhist and Jain idea saying this whole world is full of suffering. What is the point of all this money? Give it all up. So the Puran said, let's reconcile these two ideas. Let's come up. And they said, okay, we will come up with a third idea. And they came up with the Puran to explain this concept. So they said, okay, one group is like, I want to satisfy my hunger. I want. I'll work hard. So householder idea. That is Brahma. So Brahma is the householder. He performs yajna. He feeds everyone. His children are always fighting with each other over the property. And they are like, the Pandavas and Kauravas are fighting. Devas and Asuras are fighting. There's a lot of conflict in the world. And this is the world of conflicts because there's everybody trying to satisfy their hunger. That becomes the world of the Brahma. Then came the other group said that there are some what is called the hermits. They said we must destroy hunger completely destroy hunger, because if you're not hungry then you will not want food. If you don't want food, you don't want property, then you will not fight. So there is peace, shanti. So let's destroy hunger. So that became the Shiva school. Shivas. So how is Shiva visualized? Seated on a mountain covered with snow and there is nothing growing there. He says it doesn't matter because I'm not hungry. I don't need food. It's cold. It doesn't matter. I don't feel cold. If I don't want anything, I can stay anywhere. So it's a way of visualizing. It's a visualization. And then they say this world can't this tension is too much. So we need a reconciliation. So they say that Shiva, when you read Shiv Puran, which is Vishnu Puran, Shiv Puran, all were written at the same time, 1500 years ago. And the goddess comes to Shiva and says, you know what? You are not hungry, you're not frightened, great, good for you. But what about the Prets, the Rakshasas, the Asuras, the Devas? They're all hungry, they all want something, they all want security, they all want food, they all want something. Why are you not interested in them? And Shiva says, oh, that's a good idea, I should get in. So the Shiv Puran talks about Shiva getting married, which is a metaphor for engagement with the other. So he comes down from the mountain and comes to Kashi and he gets married. So then you have a third concept called Vishnu, the god who participates in the world for the benefit of the other. So it's like a mountain. You begin the journey as a Brahma, you are hungry and you want to satisfy your hunger, you want to take away your fears, but you're thinking of yourself. Then you go to a journey because this will never satisfy you. No matter how, it's a rat race, it's a dog-eat-dog world, it's a world of fighting, conflict. You will never be happy. So then you say, how do I become happiness? Then you go towards the Shiva path and say that I want to give up everything. I want to conquer my hunger. I don't want desires. So great, that's a great point. But then that's not enough, right? You're only thinking of yourself. You're still selfish. So this whole journey from materialism to spirituality, you're still selfish. You're only thinking of yourself. Can you think of others? And then you say, oh yeah. So now let me come down. And this is the Vishnu path, where you're engaging with others. So you count 3 gods emerge as an idea. So they're really dealing with your human emotions. Should I think of myself? Should I think of others? If I think of myself, should I think of myself materially or should I think of myself spiritually? If materially, Brahma. If spiritually, Shiva. But if I think of others, which automatically makes me spiritual and automatically I have to take care of others, so I need money, I need matter. But I'll only take care of others if I'm spiritually evolved. So that leads me to becoming Vishnu. So the 3 gods emerge. Now, why the goddesses? Because every human being, in order to survive, only needs wealth to take care of hunger. You need power to take care of fear. And you need knowledge. What makes humans special is we have knowledge. We're continuously learning. We're analytical. We have got this cognition. So we have 3 goddesses. One for wealth, Lakshmi. One for power, Durga. And one for knowledge, Saraswati. So 3 goddesses, 3 gods. Now, the moment this comes, then since we are all thinking heterosexually, we will start combining these 3 groups. We said, they must get married with each other. You know, it's like typical Indian parents, right? When they see a boy and a girl, they say, are you marrying her? Is a girlfriend? We can't imagine that they can live independent lives. But, you know, like typical Indian parents, we want everybody to get married and we want to create symmetry. So 3 gods, 3 goddesses. We can't imagine that maybe all 3 want to marry one god. Or maybe 3 gods will marry one girl. We can't think of those permutations, combination. We want monogamous. So we'll say, okay, which is the god which fits Vishnu well? Now he's helping the world, he's material. So let's give Lakshmi to him.
Okay.
So really, because Lakshmi is drawn to someone who takes care of others, because she'll always go to him, he'll give her away, then she'll come back to him. So the money circulates. So it's a business way of thinking. It's economics. It's saying because Vishnu keeps the world going round and round and round. Every time he gets money, he gives it to other people. He invests in other people. He does not differentiate between investment and generosity. For him, generosity is investment. Investment is generosity. So Lakshmi. So Vishnu is always described as being rich and his gold. And then comes Shiva. Shiva is like, I don't want to get married. I'm not interested in anything. So you need a goddess who can manage his he's so not self-absorbed, but withdrawn that you need someone who will dance on his chest like Kali, who will fight wars and who is aggressive and who will feed him and take care of him and civilize him. So you have Durga, the goddess of war, the goddess of power, strength, and she's like not willing to take no for an answer. She forces him down. So she's equally matched. And then Brahma is continuously, he's not got the wisdom, right? He's only thinking of food. His children are fighting and all that. They need knowledge. So Saraswati comes there. So then you create this kind of so these are conceptual frameworks communicated through stories.
And then there's also the children.
Then there are the children. Because after you get married, you need children quickly, right? So
children and avatars, I'd probably
so
highlight.
avatars are basically you adapt yourself to a situation. That's a different concept. It means you adapt yourself to a situation. So how does infinite God deal with a finite problem? So avatar means coming down. Avatarana means to come down. Come down from where? So from God, from heaven will come down to earth. No, it doesn't mean coming down. It means someone who has a lot of knowledge will customize it to solve a particular problem. So the infinite becomes finite. The immortal becomes mortal. And engages with the world. That's the meaning of the word avatar, not the Hollywood version where avatar is no different from superhero. No, that's not it.
Like,
Gods are not.
how they say Hanumanji is a avatar of Shiv Bhagwan. Like there is this.
So avatar is basically a Vishnu concept, and then people started pushing it everywhere.
Okay.
Really, that's not. When you read the original Valmiki Ramayana, Hanuman has nothing to do with Shivji.
Okay.
By the 10th century AD, the oldest Valmiki Ramayana we have is about, say, 2000 years old. 1000 years ago, somehow people gradually said, Ramayana is a Vishnu scripture and he is killing all the Shiv Bhakts. Ravan is a Shiv Bhakt killed. So all the Brahmins went around saying that, Vishnu killed Shiv Bhakt. So Shiv Bhakts got angry and they said, no, that's not true. Actually, Shiva is Hanuman who helped Ram is actually Shiva. And the Shiv Bhakt was a problem. So Shiva took the form of Hanuman and solved the problem. So now the story has changed. Ki Shiva enabled Ram to kill Ravan. So now from a Vishnu story, so these are all politics happening amongst different people, and different politics leads to different, like nowadays media houses will give you different versions depending on which politics they support.
So even today, especially today actually, in this decade or this phase of human history, now there's so many different versions of like the same story.
Yeah.
So my hunch is that 100, 200 years from now, it will just be perceived as ideas. Exactly the kind of stuff you're saying, that, okay, these are stories, but here's what you got to learn from the story. Here's how you apply the story in your daily life.
See, it's like if I tell you the story of Abraham Lincoln or Gandhi, how does it matter to you? Their lives are all over. It's the knowledge that you gain from Gandhi's life that makes your life valuable.
Yeah.
If you're thinking of Gandhi as a historical figure and wasting your time with a historical idea, it's to be in the archives. No? That's a historian's job. Why do you want to know about? Because that knowledge will enable you to understand about human society, human civilization. You will understand how people stood up to authority, how did they fight injustice, what were the challenges they face. You learn from history. So ultimately what you derive from things is knowledge. So it's just knowledge, nothing else. We just derive, history per se doesn't matter so much as knowledge of history.
So are you ready for an extremely Hindu question?
Sure.
The extremely Hindu question is, do you believe in the concept of rebirth?
Yeah, of course.
So do you think you were born before as something else? Why are you born as Devdutt Patnaik in this life? Why are you writing like all these teachings?
We will never know.
Why? I'm sure you've thought of that question.
I have, but you see, the question is not you are what you are. It's like I can use that knowledge to feel depressed. Oh, why am I not Amitabh Bachchan? Why was I not born as Sachin Tendulkar? Why was I not born as this thing? But I'm born what I am. And it's like every plant doesn't know which tree produced the seed that transformed into this plant. Right? In your garden, you don't know from which tree the seed has come. You don't care about where it came from. It comes and it becomes a tomato. But do you know which tomato ka seed se ye tomato plant nikla hai? You don't know which seed produces which plant. In the same way, I don't know which seed from where the seed came that has turned into a plant called Devdutt Patnaik.
Do you believe in this concept? So when I've been reading a lot about rebirth, and I read that a lot of the knowledge you carry in this birth, or the wisdom you discover in this birth, is things you've already discovered in your past life, and you're probably carrying it forward, and it's reached a level of maturity in your head now where you're able to give it to the world.
See, it's called retrofacting. I'm trying to figure out ideas to explain life, and we always come up with ideas like that. There's no way to prove it or disprove it. See, unlike science is based on evidence. This is a concept. It's a conceptual framework that enables you to think in a particular way. But you really don't know. Like as I said, God, devil, soul, rebirth, these are mythic ideas. These are ways in which humans explain life. So somebody will say there's only one God in this world and there's only one life in the world. So their explanations will be different from people who believe there are many gods and many lives. Which explanation is correct? Like I always tell people, justice is a concept. It's not real. You believe in justice and that creates a civilized society. But where is justice? Some people come together and decide this is justice.
Yeah.
Or property. What is property? This is mine. Ye mera zameen hai. This is my land. Who said? Who said that? You decided, and nobody's arguing with you because you have a sword in the hand. If anybody challenges, you'll cut their head off. So if you buy a flat, they will say you have to register it with the government. Because the government will then ensure that nobody takes your flat away. Otherwise, it doesn't belong to you, right? You need a registration by the government.
Yep. Yep.
Now, if that government tomorrow is thrown out and a new government comes and the government says, we don't believe in anything the previous government said, they'll come and take away your property. Right? So the America, for example, was full of Native American people who didn't believe in private property. They believed land cannot be owned by a person. A bunch of Europeans land up who say, no, land can be owned by a person. Of course, our land in Europe is owned by the king, so we don't have any land. So now we will take your land because you don't own it, because you are saying it doesn't belong to anyone. You're foolish people, you're not civilized, you're barbarians, and slaughtered them and took the land away. And suddenly now it belongs to them. Belongs. So these are all assumptions. Society is based on assumptions and cultural frameworks. If no land belongs to you technically at a metaphysical level, 1000 years ago, 100 years ago, Bombay didn't exist. So
one of my favorite authors who keeps coming up in every podcast of ours, Yuval Noah Harari, he talks about this and he calls it fictions. Like the whole world is built on fictions.
Yes, Harari is unkind. Because he does not respect people's beliefs. When he calls it fiction, he's saying it's not true. It's true for the person who believes it. You can't go to someone who believes in Jesus Christ and say, "Ye to fiction hai. This is fiction." That's cruel. Why do you tell if he's a Christian and his life is a happy place, he goes to church, he believes in Jesus Christ, he is happy with his life, why would you go and tell him that your belief is fiction? That's cruelty. Why would you go to a Muslim and say that, this Makkah, it's all fiction, this is all fiction? Yes, that's cruel. That means you don't respect people's beliefs. Will you go to a tribal community and say, it's fiction, therefore we can take your land away? Because my fiction is better than your fiction. So while he uses the word fiction, I understand where he's coming from. It's also a cruel book. It's a cruel book which he doesn't talk about multiple ideas coexisting, colliding ideas. And because he's also shaped by Buddhism. And in Buddhism, the whole idea is shunya. Nothing really matters. So giving meaning is dependent origination. And therefore he's presenting a Buddhist worldview. And it's not a scientific worldview. So he himself is following the Buddhist fiction. And he's presenting the Buddhist fiction that shunya, everything is fiction. Everything is fiction, which is so classic Nagarjuna's theory, which is nothing really matters, nothing has any meaning. We give meaning to things, we give matter. So nothing actually metaphysically has meaning. But it has meaning to me. It has meaning to you. It has meaning to others. You feel it is meaningless, but other people feel. And that is the conflict between Shiva and Shakti. Well, Shiva says shunya, shunya, shunya. And Shakti says no. Ananta, ananta, ananta. Everything is there. Everything matters. If it matters to me, why can't you respect my belief? So when I read Harari's this fiction thing, I'm like, it's such a cruel idea. Because it is basically saying all cultures, all civilizations are all false. And of course, he'll say, no, I don't mean false. But yes, you are saying the word fiction. You have chosen a word which is fiction. The word myth I use is because the word myth means story. It's not fiction. The word myth means a story that I believe in. So mythos means a story that you believe in. In Sanskrit, the word mithya means an incomplete truth. It doesn't mean false. It means incomplete. Because you see only so much, like the 6 blind men and the elephant. Your mithya is you have only so much view and therefore you don't get the full picture. So that's all it is. So for me, Harari is a very popular book, but I find it a deep... And one of the reasons why Buddhism didn't succeed in India is because of this. One of the reasons, there are many reasons, political reasons, economic reasons. One of the reasons is you can't go to people and saying that nothing really matters in the life. So if you look at the story of Buddha, Buddha walks away from his kingdom, from his wife, from his son, and becomes a monk. So he basically says everything is fiction. Kingship is fiction, husband is fiction, children, this parenting, I don't want any of it. And he becomes the Buddha, the aware one. We realize that we give meaning to things. Shiva's story in Shiv Puran is the opposite. He is single who gets married and produces children. It's the very opposite of the Buddha story, which is saying that, yes, I know the world has no meaning, but it is meaningful for other people, and I respect their beliefs. which is the problem right now with woke people and this postmodern people. We're really thinking like that. Nothing has meaning. Whatever I say, you're not respecting other people's beliefs. You're saying my beliefs only matter. Your beliefs don't matter. But in our Upanishads, in the Indian Upanishads, they said, Aham Brahmasmi, which means I have the capability of giving meaning and value to my life. Tattvamasi, so do you. And our relationship is a negotiation between my meaning and your meaning, my fiction and your fiction. You may not consider it fiction, but I think it's fiction, but I have to respect your views.
Yeah.
So that is missing in Yuval Harari's work. I mean, it's very obvious. Only Sapiens, I've not read the other books. But when I read the book, I'm like, oh, it's a beautiful book. It explains the idea of myth and imagination, but it's also not respecting it. It is disrespectful of the whole world is based on imagination. We've created these ideas, whether it's property, institutions, democracy, and one idea is not better than the other. It's like when you say dictatorship is bad, who said so? If you say democracy is bad, who said so? There's no good, bad. There are different ideas. They keep coming. Sometimes they make us happy. Sometimes they make us unhappy. We improve on them. We struggle with them. We fight with them, and then we die. And a new generation comes, looks at the old ideas and changes it. Some people like Facebook, some like Instagram, some like Snapchat, which is better. And it changes. It will keep changing. So that doesn't make it meaningless. But it's a very shunya. Shunya is a very Buddhist idea. It's a strong Buddhist, almost nihilistic. Not almost, it is nihilism. It's at the end of it. So when they say the world is, so shunya and samsara, these are, likely I can go into another conversations.
While I know that you can go into many places, sir, I can't tell you how much I've enjoyed the last 2-3 hours of talking to you, doing a Hindi podcast, doing an English podcast. We do have one final segment left on our English podcast. Before that, I'd just like to highlight something. We're sitting around your books, there's posters of your books like behind you. And I feel like this is the accumulation of knowledge. And I've not read all your books, and I do intend on, but I've spoken to you and I've exchanged energies with you. And what I gain from knowing you as a person is that there's 3 things you stand for above anything. The first is, of course, learning and sharing. And that goes together. The second I'd definitely say is doing. You're much more concerned about action. Karmanyavadhikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. And the third thing I'd definitely highlight is empathy. I'm guessing that empathy is something you've learned over time through your studies.
I think the biggest learning that we have in us, what is called spirituality, is to be sensitive to other people and caring for other people. Most self-help books is about self. People like Maslow's theory a lot. And Maslow's theory at the end of the day is self-actualization. It's about you. There is no consideration for the other. While nature is not designed like that. Nature is constantly designed between self and other. So no plant exists in isolation, right? There are hundreds of plants which came together to create this plant. This plant creates so many energies, and we use the word energy, but when I use the word idea, it is a non-materialistic idea. It's non-material. While energy is material. So those who are uncomfortable with non-material will use the material word energy. So for me, it's an idea. And imagination is something that we don't understand. It's not a substance. What is it? We don't know. But it is there, mind. So Indian idea, and I think even globally, is this idea of exchange. All organic things exchange to survive. And that, for me, therefore, empathy is embedded in it. And therefore, the solution. So you begin your journey by being hungry, and then you discover fear, and then you struggle with hunger and fear. But until you realize that people around you are hungry and frightened, wisdom doesn't dawn. Wisdom just doesn't come. So when I look at a ghost or a goblin or dark spaces, what is dark space? Hunger, fear. Which manifests. So we look at any horror show, there'll always be suffering, misery, somebody was killed here, and that suffering is manifesting in a ghost. Or a monster is because they were cursed or they were treated badly and they're taking revenge and they're angry and they're upset. So in India, they will not exorcise ghosts. They will calm ghosts down. The word is very different. There is a ghost, they won't say get rid of it. So nowadays, there's all these, get rid. It's not that. It is Shant, calm them down, give them what they want, tell them to go away, request them because they're hungry, they're seeking, and so therefore they're trying to enter other people's bodies and make them miserable. But it's really talking about hunger, fear. So for me, empathy is a very important word because see, the first question is learning to empathize. Sharing is possible only when you empathize. Doing is because you want to. So empathy is at the heart of a great life. To live a very sad, and it's very difficult to empathize. Trust me, when you meet a jerk, how do you empathize with a jerk? How do you empathize with a troll? How do you empathize with a rude person, obnoxious person? It's easier to empathize with sad people and victims and miserable people or friends. How do you empathize with horrible human beings?
I mean, the art of empathy will open up doors in your life. So you better just learn it. Whether it's career progress, communication skills, whatever it is, empathy is at the core of everything. So,
Yeah,
so
it is for sure. For me, that's the idea.
because we're at the end of the episode, I'm just going to take you to our Twitter verse rapid fire round, for lack of a better name.
Sure.
We've had like an explosion on Twitter the moment we mentioned that you're going to be on the Ranveer show, sir. So I'm going to quickly take you through some of the questions. Sanjit Keswani from my team, actually, he asks, what is Sir's source of learning himself? Like, I'm sure it changes for you, but if you could highlight where you learn from.
I gather data a lot. So I have lots of encyclopedias. My phone is full of data, lots of encyclopedias. But processing, I do it personally. So my learning, really what I share with the world is not data or information. I share my experience, my knowledge, what I understood and what makes sense to me. So I digest it and reproduce it to people. So digestion process is my own. So I read a lot, like Yuval Harari, everybody, I read it and I kept saying, okay, what's missing in this book? Why is it, it's great, beautifully written, excellent. I was really, because many people told me, I kept getting, sir, and now the people say you are influenced by Yuval Harari. And I'm like, I wrote 10 years before he did. Clearly.
Yeah.
It's very sad. The popular person is always considered to be the source of knowledge. I'm like, sure, he has never heard of me. But these are these are ideas which are not known. He's articulated it better. So my source of knowledge is reading. I read a lot, but also observing people.
Observing people?
Observing things, observing society. Why are people drawn to politicians who don't give them anything?
Observing celebrities or people?
Everybody.
Okay.
I see what I see in the rich house, I see that in the poor house. I see that everywhere. And I'm like, that's how I can say, okay, this is what is happening. This is what's happening. Everywhere the same thing is happening. The same formula works. The same, the rules in point A is working in point B. And that's how when you hear me speak, it's the refinement over several contexts. I've been, does it work here? Does it work here? When I said, I have this famous thing of LSD, like Lakshmi Saraswati Durga, so wealth, power, and knowledge. Is there a fourth one? And I searched, I said, no, it's not, I can't find one. So I'm quite impressed. So that's what I do. I keep refining my ideas. I don't sit with an idea. So I will write, like I've been writing Ramayana for the last 20 years, again and again and again and again and again. So if you analyze my first Ramayana book from the last, you'll say, oh my God, it's changed, it's changing. It's not changing, it's refining. It's the same thing, but milk becomes curds become butter becomes ghee. So that's how it keeps refining.
Okay. Very simple question. Ashwini Patel asks, should mythology be a part of school education?
Yes.
Little breakdown that. So.
See, I think children need to appreciate how they imagine the world, how their parents imagine the world, how their ancestors imagine the world, how people around them imagine the world.
For perspective building?
Yes, because otherwise you won't have empathy. Because if you don't know how you imagine the world, like you say, I believe in God. Somebody says, I don't believe in God. Now instead of fighting, which is vivad, argument, I am right, you are right, my imagination is better than your imagination. You will say, you know what, no, hey, great idea, your imagination is different from mine. Why is it? Let's have a conversation. Samvad. So instead of a conflict, you'll have collaboration. So mythology enables collaboration.
Okay, Nikita Awalkar asks a bunch of questions, but I'm going to take the one I find very interesting. She talks about archery skills and techniques that existed at the time. If you've ever seen B.R. Chopra's Mahabharata, you've had those special effects of one arrow turning into 10 arrows. But she's asked you about things like the Divyastras, like the Brahmastra, or the other magical weapons that were used.
See, these are imaginations.
Okay.
This is how we imagine our world. As I said, one arrow will become 10 arrows, one arrow will turn into a serpent, one arrow will turn into a bird, one will burst into flames. It's a beautiful way of explaining things, right? When I will say that when she entered the room, her hair flew like some vampire. Does vampires exist? But we love the stories of Twilight and we love those vampire stories and zombie stories. Are they real? Did they really happen?
Okay. Rushikesh Vidyasagar asks, so why do you think less has been written about Yudhishthir in Mahabharata, though he was, the cleanest human being, Dharmaraj Yudhishthir, the eldest Pandav? Why is more importance given to Arjun, current characters like that?
Because you don't have good writers who have really read the Ramayana and Mahabharata. When you read these scriptures, you realize every character is a novel, is a great idea. Through each character, not just Yudhishthir, but Yudhishthir, because he's, we don't like people who are
Boring.
goody two shows and honest and trying to do the right thing. They're very boring people. We like dangerous people, rakish people, bullies. We always say that the girls like bad guys. The fact is, everybody likes bad guys. They're cool. It's so much cooler than them. Therefore, even our heroes are having dark sides. And you have a dark Batman, a dark Superman, and it's just we like the dark because I think it sort of fascinates us.
It's the same logic, like kind of having a crush on a toxic person, even
Yes.
you know it's wrong for them.
Yes, you
not saying that either any character is toxic, but people just don't like vanilla.
Nobody likes vanilla. It's like you love the toxicity because you know why? Because there's also the assumption that you can turn the toxic person around with your magical powers. That toxic person will become nice. Taming of the Shrew. मैं उनको सीधे line पे लेके आया because I'm so great. I have this magical ability. A drunkard will stop being a drunkard. The wife beater will stop because I have that magical power. Fortunately, the person doesn't want to change. He won't change.
Okay. So, Rajas Pardeshi asks, other than the Mahabharata and Ramayana, like are there, other texts that people should look into, especially story-based texts?
Yeah,
I'm
the
guessing.
Purans. The Purans have to be read. So Vishnu Puran, Shiva Puran, Devi Puran, the Puranic literature, which is not so well organized like Ramayana and Mahabharata, are very well organized. And they've also been translated more. The Purans are very important. So the Jataka stories are important. Then the folklores are important. Vikramaditya stories, Bhoja stories, Shalivahan stories. Then there are this whole bunch of erotic stories like Shuka Shaptati, Katha Sarit Sagar. These are folklores, these are not myths. The mythology will be Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puran, then Buddha Charita, then the Agama literature of the Jains, the Tirthankaras. The Jain Mahabharata is different, the Jain Ramayana is very different. Kalpa Sutra of the Jains is very important scripture that people are not familiar with. Buddha has like a whole bunch of stuff to read, Buddhism. It's like vast literature which exists. Tantric Buddhism, Vajrayapani, Padmapani, which there are beautiful stories about their adventures. 550 stories in Jatakas alone, not just what is there in the comic books. There are a whole bunch of stories that people don't tell you.
Okay, Saurabh at H. Baruas asks, Shivling consists of two parts, Lingam and Yoni. Is it anywhere related to genitals? This is like a interesting question because we see this a lot on the internet.
Yeah. So this is, and it'll never be, every time you answer also, not that it will solve. See, you should understand a symbol. A symbol is a representation of an idea, right? So for example, if we go to church, you see a crucifix. You don't call it a torture instrument, do you? But what was the purpose of a crucifix? It was meant to torture people. People would be impaled and nailed on it and tortured. So you don't go to church and says, oh, why are there so many torture instruments around? You say crucifix. When you see a Jesus Christ body hanging from the cross, you don't say, hey, why is a dead body hanging? You say, that's Jesus Christ. When you go to Mecca and you see people going around and around and there is the Kaaba, you don't say, why are people going around a room? You say, you're going around the Kaaba. You give it a proper noun. You don't see it what it is. It is a room. It's just a room, the Kaaba. But why are you calling it the Kaaba? It's out of respect. So in the same way, the Shivling is based on human genitals, but it is not human genitals. It's an idea. So it's the idea. So what is important is who worships the linga. You have to ask that person. What do you see? and he'll say, I see God, then it is God.
Subjective.
It is a
realities.
subjective reality of the believer. Otherwise, I will say, oh, Muslims go to Mecca to go around a room. Excuse me, that's very offensive. You can't say that. You can't say that Christians worship a torture instrument with a dead body on it, which they call Jesus Christ. In the same way, you cannot look at a shivling and say that, oh, Hindus worship genitals. No, that's a very silly and stupid way of looking at things because it's disrespectful. You're not respecting the people who actually worship the shivling because they're worshipping the idea. They don't care what it is. They're saying, though, this idea is what energizes me. So we worship ideas. We don't worship forms.
Arya SPM asks if there's so much documentation of specific magical mantras related to weapons, related to like the mantra that the Kunti Ma had used to conceive the Pandavas. Why is there no trace of it today? Is there any kind of trace?
No, these are all marketing.
Just stories.
These are marketing gimmicks. Because if you read now, how many people have read the Brihad Devata, which is a whole collection of stories which are based on Vedas, and they will say that this man was riding a chariot and he chanted this mantra and the wheel broke, but the chariot continued because he could chant a mantra. So they were marketing mantras. They were selling this idea. We want to believe in the exotic, because we, instead of if I tell you that, you can lose weight by going to the gym and doing proper diet exercise versus take this magic pill and you'll lose weight. What do you think is going to sell more? The magic pill. Gym memberships will never match magic. There are more magic pill remedies today than there are gyms, right? But because people want to believe in magical things. We want to believe in aise karne se bachcha ho jayega, aise karne se, you just place 10 rupees in this fund and it will become 1,000 rupees, and that's all scamsters do that, right? That's how the world functions.
Okay, and one final question of this round, sir. Asta Singh asks a very nice question. Even though there are so many goddesses in our culture and, so many powerful women are portrayed in our scriptures, why do you think like the modern day system has become patriarchal?
You see, India has all kinds of stories. There are patriarchal stories, there are feminist stories, all kinds of stories exist. Ultimately, it becomes about human beings not respecting women. It has nothing to do with stories. You can choose and pick and choose stories that justify whatever you want to justify.
And it happens all over the world. Even though it's highlighted in India.
Yeah, everywhere women are seen as inferior. See, it's heterosexuals think they're superior to homosexuals. Men think they're superior to women. White people think they're superior to dark people. So I think it's our ego at work. It's our ego at work. Imagine if you are a dark woman who is a homosexual, her life will be miserable. Because the white lobby will make fun of her, the heterosexual lobby will make fun of her, the patriarchal lobby will make fun of her, and her life will be tough because it's basically we don't respect people. We don't respect people, we don't, and if you respect people, I'm not using the word gender or anything, then life will become better. Then you'll respect consent, you'll respect private space. I think respect is a very important word. Parents don't respect their children. Children don't respect their parents. I see parents just abusing their children and saying, you'll do whatever I tell you to do. That's abuse. You're not, it's every human being is by themselves. There is to be a give and take, a relationship. So I think somewhere disrespect. It's not about patriarchy or sexism or heterosexual. All these words are words.
It's lack of empathy.
It's lack of empathy. That's lack of. At the end of the day, ghoom fir ke aao, everything, the problem comes down to, as a human being, you have not developed the wisdom to overpower your insecurities that enables you to pay attention to others.
Yep.
In Indian temples, the gods have these big eyes. And they said, darshan karo, go and look, and the god will look at you. I think they are trying to tell us that look at each other. Darshan karo, empathize, understand each other's hunger and insecurities. And maybe life will become a little better. Not 100%, but a little better.
Thank you for all these answers, sir. Thank you for the, I'd like to call it crash course on empathy. But no, from the bottom of my heart, I really respect it. And I really respect everything you've shared, because I think one of the purposes of starting this podcast was to show India the real power of podcasting, which the West has embraced. And it's one of those things I really want our country to embrace from the rest of the world. Podcasting can expand your perspectives. And thank you for satisfying one of my personal dreams of bringing you on the Ranveer
Thank
show.
you so much.
I hope you had fun.
So much. I had.
Thank you. Beautiful. Appreciate it a lot. So thank you. So that was a special episode with the man, the legend, Devdutt Patnaik. So someone who's constantly going deeper into his subject. That's honestly the beauty of Indian culture in general. It's so deep that there's no limit to how much you can learn in terms of what different gods stand for, in terms of what different scriptures stand for, in terms of what different schools of philosophy stand for. And you need people like Devdutt Patnaik in modern day India to take ancient culture and bring it out to the modern world. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you like it, make sure you comment down below, make sure you share it with your friends. And of course, make sure you follow the Ranveer Show on Spotify. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. Lots more episodes about Indian culture and Indian history just like this coming up on the Ranveer Show.